The topic of conversation today is Act 37, which was passed almost 50 years ago. So I guess it's probably an appropriate topic of conversation to take a look at. So the first presenter is Dana Ungst from the Department of Environmental Protection. Good morning.
Chairman Yacht, Chairman Udicek, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony regarding the importance of the Pennsylvania Sewage Facilities Act, Act 537, and share some suggestions that DEP believes are needed to modernize the Act. I'm particularly pleased to have been asked to represent DEP, as over the past 30 years, I've worked in and around the Sewage Facilities Program. During that time, I've been a regulator at both DER and DEP, a consulting engineer who helped write Act 537 plans, certified sewage enforcement officer, and a municipal engineer who implemented these plans. That experience has given me a great perspective on the pros and cons of the Act. To begin, for the past almost 50 years, there may be no more important statute in the Commonwealth for protection of public health at the most local level than Act 537. The post-World War II push of unregulated suburban development into rural areas resulted in ubiquitous problems with pollution to the environment that was compromising public health and safety. Many citizens purchased newly created lots and built their American dream home only to find that the soils on which their sewage treatment and disposal systems were installed were unsuitable, and their purchased properties were greatly devalued. As a result of these significant public health and property value problems, in January of 1966, the Pennsylvania General Assembly developed and passed what is currently and commonly known as Act 537. Act 537, among other things, provides for municipal sewage facility planning, local permitting of on-site sewage treatment and disposal facilities, the training and certification of sewage enforcement officers, and the enforcement and continued compliance with regulatory standards and practices. There have been 6 amendments to the Act since 1966, Act 177 of 1968, Act 43 of 1970, Act 208 of 1974, Act 26 of 1989, Act 149 of 1994, and Act 41 of 2013. The last significant amendment to Act 537 was Act 149 in 1994. All of these amendments to the Act were in essence Band-Aid approaches to the problems perceived at those times, but the combined effects of these numerous and patchwork minor revisions have resulted in unintended negative effects on implementation of the Act through regulation and guidance, and have caused confusion for public and local officials. These unintended consequences, as well as the antiquity of Act 537, have left the public and local officials frustrated and angry with the Act and its requirements as we have them in place today. DEP would like to see a complete overhaul of the statute to bring it up to modern standards and to ensure that public health and safety standards are maintained for Pennsylvania citizens. We have a number of focus areas that I will touch on today, but there are many other items that DEP would recommend in any overhaul of the Act. First, DEP suggests that counties and their planning commissions or regional planning entities should have a greater role in sewage facilities planning. This recommended change would promote regionalization of sewerage facilities, which has been a goal of the Act since its inception. In many municipal settings, there is a lack of intermunicipal cooperation when it comes to planning or the sharing of resources for sustainable infrastructure development. We tend to have an easier time sending our children to school together than we do sending our sewage to the same location to be treated. This does not make economic or environmental sense. There can be significant cost savings when sewage treatment and disposal solutions are developed on a regional scale instead of on a single municipality basis. We have observed recently successful regional solutions. One example is the West Branch Regional Authority that collects and treats waste from 5 municipalities in Lycoming County: Montgomery Borough, Muncie Borough, Clinton Township, Muncie Creek Township, and Muncie Township. Another, just downriver from West Branch, is the Northern Neighbors effort in northern Northumberland County. This project included a regionalization effort between Watsontown Borough, Milton Borough, Delaware Township, that consolidated sewage systems and, importantly, eliminated two small, outdated, and environmentally inefficient wastewater discharges, with all of the wastewater now being sent to the Milton Regional Sewer Authority's state-of-the-art treatment facility. We also have observed areas where regional facilities would have been a much better solution to what is currently in place. For example, just across the river from us, there are 6 major individually owned and operated wastewater treatment works located in very close proximity to each other: Lower Allen Township, Hampton Township, East Pennsboro Township, Lemoyne Borough, Silver Spring Township, and Mechanicsburg Borough. There is no doubt that an economy of scale could be realized if such facilities operated either as one entity or, at the very least, shared the resources and costs associated with their sewage facilities needs. Second, DEP also suggests that changes to the Act should include a requirement for third-party testing and verification and certification of new on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems. As the cost of the installation and operation of publicly owned gravity collection and interceptor sewer systems and centralized wastewater treatment plants have escalated, municipalities have become more reliant on the long-term use of individual or community on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems. These on-site systems are no longer considered to be a temporary solution until public sewers become available. They are and must be considered to be permanent wastewater treatment and disposal infrastructure. The Act and its implementing permitting regulations currently define on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems in these categories: conventional, alternate, and experimental. All 3 types of systems require a suitable soil profile in order to be considered acceptable for their use. Because of the growth in many areas, rural areas of the Commonwealth, many areas previously thought not to be suitable for the use of on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems are now contemplating the use of alternate and/or experimental technologies. And there have been many new developments in the area of on-site sewage treatment and disposal system technology that allow on-site systems to be used where the soil conditions do not meet the current requirements for planning purposes, meaning the laying out and sizing of lots. Many of these systems are considered alternate technologies since they are not yet recognized as regulatory standard conventional technologies. It is critical that any change to the Act maintain soils testing requirements during planning that are site-specific and blind to technology to assure that the current practice of protecting the public health is continued. We also recommend removing any references to technological evaluations or specific technologies that can be used for on-site sewage disposal systems. For example, local municipal officials certainly do not want entire developments in which all of the sewage treatment and disposal systems installed are alternate technologies that are supposed to work on less than 20 inches of suitable soil. This multiple lot approach was not part of any testing protocol and may simply result in creating treated sewage wetlands. As implied, a key issue concerning alternate technologies is their testing and validation. We must ensure that these systems will function properly for the long term. While a testing and validation process exists in DEP regulation, it is implemented through technical guidance. There's no definitive requirement in Act 537 that testing of new technologies must be conducted under a routine, consistent, and technically sound protocol. The testing for these systems should be rigorous, and the results should be reproducible years after the initial testing. DEP recommends that a standard testing regimen performed by a qualified third party, such as the National Sanitation Foundation, NSF, be mandatory for all new on-site technologies. A qualified third party, such as NSF, would place its seal on a successful testing demonstration. Such a seal would be the approval needed for use in the Commonwealth, and all properly tested and sealed systems would be considered acceptable in all situations. At DEP, we are aware that there are alternate technologies on the approved list for use because of past administrative pressure to list them before adequate testing was completed. Approving inadequately vetted alternate technologies can set up future homeowners for system failure and an avoidable extra expense. Third-party approval would take DEP out of the alternate technology development approval process, allowing thorough testing according to national best practices to be conducted prior to any approval. Third, as municipalities develop and the density of their population grows, the need for on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems to function well over the long term as permanent infrastructure has become evident. This need has increased with the advent of new complicated technologies. DEP believes that it's time to mandate sewage management programs be adopted and implemented by local agencies. Sewage management program is more than just having septic tanks pumped periodically. A sewage management program includes inspections of the systems to ensure that they are functioning properly and providing adequate treatment. Sewage management programs help protect the investment made by homeowners by ensuring that their property does not become devalued due to a lack of adequate sewage disposal. Local entities have cited the lack of funding as a reason not to implement a sewage management program. Any sewage management program requirement should allow fees to be charged by local agencies to residents that have on-site systems that would cover sewage management program costs. On-site sewage disposal systems should be treated in the same manner as other sewage facility infrastructure. Allowing fees to be charged by local agencies to provide the planning and implementation of a sewage management program could make these types of plans more acceptable to local officials. These fees should be dedicated for the purpose of running sewage management programs. Fourth, changes to the Act should require that all municipal sewage plans be evaluated and either adopted or readopted by the local agency at least every 10 years. In many areas of the Commonwealth, the adopted and approved sewage facilities plans are seriously out of date. There are some municipalities that have never adopted their own 537 plan and rely on old county plans developed before 1967. In South Central Pennsylvania, approximately 25% of all plans are old county plans. Further, 12% of all municipalities across the state have plans older than 40 years, and 70% of all municipalities across the state have plans older than 10 years. As part of the testimony, we provided a map showing this in detail. This lack of implementation of the basic function of Act 537, which is local sewage facilities planning, means that sewage planning decisions are being made via a patchwork plan amendment process known as the planning module process. This is not the intended purpose of the Act, and it adds delay and unnecessary expense to the development process. Having plans reviewed and updated as necessary every 10 years will ensure that plans are up to date, avoiding the need for DEP review of each and every new development, and possibly avoiding situations where development projects are prohibited simply because a plan was out of date or worse, never adopted. Having up-to-date plans will also minimize and possibly eliminate the surprise factor to new municipal officials or residents moving into a community. Such a review every 10 years would not require that currently developed and approved plans be updated unless it was needed. Fifth, the department has and is currently experiencing some problems with sewage enforcement officers. Specifically, Act 537 revision should include provisions for a more robust sewage enforcement officer continuing education program. Program specifics can be administered through regulation. However, the basis for the requirements should be included in the statute. The regulation can cover required hours, types of course material, how to qualify as a training provider, and the fees that sewage enforcement officers pay to maintain their certification. In addition, regulation could allow SEOs to perform inspections of on-site single residential sewage treatment facilities. Sixth, we would request removal of language related to fees and authorize DEP to adopt fees by way of regulation. This includes those fees related to DEP review as well as local agency activities. The current fee structure has been in place since 1994 and needs to be updated to reflect the cost of carrying out various services. Regulations place these fees in a more manageable place where they would be subject to periodic review that would determine the appropriateness of the fees. Promulgation of fees through regulation would still be subject to a rigorous public review, including a review by this committee. Seventh, we believe it's past time to eliminate the 10-acre permit exemption. This exemption allows new land development without sewage facilities planning on parcels of 10 acres or more in size that existed prior to January 10, 1987. This provision was initially provided to guarantee that historic, large landowners were not tasked or their land investments threatened by the new facility planning requirements. new in 1972. In addition, this exemption allows for any on-lot sewage treatment and disposal system on a 10-acre exempt property to be sited, designed, and installed with minimal or no standards. These types of systems are exempt from local agency permitting. Although a property owner would be remiss to install a system that is likely to fail, it has been done under this 10-acre exemption to planning and permitting. After almost 50 years of implementation of the Act, the applicability of this exemption is rare. DEP believes that all new land development should go through the sewage facilities planning process. Lastly, any revisions to the Act should address the Sewage Advisory Committee. The SAC's current size and composition need to be evaluated and modernized. The group has become too large, right now 30 members, to serve its intended purpose of advising the department. Its composition is outdated and questionably appropriate. As an example, in spelling out the membership of SAC, Act 537 contains provisions for entities that are defunct, such as the Pennsylvania Environmental Health Association, or whose responsibilities have been reassigned. The Office of State Planning and Development, the Pennsylvania Department of Commerce, and the Pennsylvania Department of Community Affairs are examples. The department is also concerned that some of the members of the SAC do not serve the role of their appointing organization. In some circumstances, this has resulted in a lack of consensus among members relating to recommendations provided to DEP. For example, we recently received comments from SAC and a separate set of comments from a group that's represented on SAC that presented an opposing view. The department is concerned that some individuals may have been on the committee for a very long time and suggests consideration of the limiting the number of terms individuals can serve on this advisory committee. As stated, this testimony reflects a number of areas of focus for which DEP would recommend changes to Act 537. There are many other points we would like to discuss. Should this committee recommend that changes are needed for the Act, DEP recommends a comprehensive overhaul and not a patchwork effort designed to address one group's frustration with the current statute. DEP stands ready to assist with such an overhaul, and we look forward to working with the General Assembly to rewrite Act 537 in a way that modernizes and strengthens sewage planning and permitting to benefit all Pennsylvanians. That concludes my testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. It's very comprehensive, and it points out a lot of areas that I agree with you. It's going to take a lot of work to do it. It will be comprehensive. I have one question. You mentioned this early on with respect to regionalizing sewage treatment facilities. I'm not so sure I agree with you about kids going to school together, because we have this thing about, everybody likes their own mascot and their own teams and all that, and that's why we have 500 school districts. I'm not sure, though, I don't really understand why that same mentality applies to sewage.
Mr. Chairman, it's interesting you bring that up, because I questioned my staff when they gave me that, and I think a lot of the whole school district thing depends on what part of the state you're from. In some places, you have larger regional school systems, but we do tend to see situations in sewage facilities planning in which municipalities just refuse to work together for whatever reason, and having a larger body, and it can be a recommending body, and that's what we would suggest, but giving the counties or the county planning commissions or regional planning entities more role in sitting at the table to try to bring these municipalities together for regional solutions is what our suggestion is.
Thank you. Senator Udicek.
I'd like to follow up on, because I fully support the idea of promoting a regional approach to sewage treatment, to promote intermunicipal cooperation. In northeastern Pennsylvania, I have many examples where neighboring communities are not working together, and whether it's the economy of scale of reducing the cost of the overall project, the impact to economic development. We have one case where an 8-mile sewer line runs through 5 municipalities that supports significant development in one municipality, but yet 5 municipalities have to maintain that line. It hasn't been maintained. There hasn't been significant investments over the last 100 years in that line. So how would the department, in the proposal, in the suggestions for a new Act 537 plan, promote that regional cooperation? How do you move Luzerne County with 76 municipalities? How do you move those municipalities to the point where you would have a regional or county entity driving that situation?
Mr. Chairman, one thing I know that we would not be proposing as the department is things that we've tried to do in the past that were, I don't want to say a failure. They didn't work very well. Prior to, I think it was the amendments of 1994, the department had the authority to order municipalities to work together. While some may argue that we still have that authority, it's less clear in the act as it's written today. And those types of orders issued by the agency tend to get us into litigation that lasts for years and years. We would prefer to see another entity, such as a regional planning entity or a county planning commission, be the facilitator to get these folks to work together so that we're not coming in being the regulatory entity that has to issue an order, then that gets appealed, and we end up forcing municipalities to do something. It's much easier to get people to work together when they feel that they're part of the process. And if there were some entity, our suggestion is giving counties more role at the table in terms of facilitating the planning process to try to get those municipalities to work together.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. No questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Dwayne Mowry, the chairman of the Sewage Advisory Committee. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Well, good morning, Senators, and thank you for the opportunity to present testimony on a very important issue. My name is Dwayne Mowry, and I'm a resident of Hopewell Township, Cumberland County. I'm a PADEP certified water system operator, wastewater system operator, and a sewage enforcement officer. I've been a member of the Sewage Advisory Committee to DEP since 2003, and I'm currently serving my second two-year term as chairman of that committee. I appreciate Mr. Ongst raising the Sewage Advisory Committee as an important part of this process. The Sewage Advisory Committee is a statutory entity created by the Sewage Facilities Act, and it's ostensibly for the purpose of providing input to DEP. The Act states that, quote, the Advisory Committee shall have the opportunity to review proposed rules, regulations, standards, and procedures, and shall review existing rules, regulations, standards, and procedures of the department pursuant to the Act. Act 537 is one of the most comprehensive statutes in the Commonwealth and touches every Pennsylvanian in one way or another. As such, and also because Pennsylvania is the only state that has a formal legislated and regulated sewage planning program, the highest levels of experience and competence available both within and from outside the department are demanded. Owing to the retirement of a large number of experienced Act 537 personnel in the department within the last 10 years, and considering the experience with the regulations promulgated under this act that is represented on the Sewage Advisory Committee, I would expect the department to actively involve the committee in nearly all aspects of the program. Unfortunately, while there was obviously a time when that was the case, it currently is not and has not been for quite a while. To add perspective to this situation, roughly 1/4 of Pennsylvania's population, that's roughly 3 million people, are affected by activities that the department will consult occasionally with the Sewage Advisory Committee on, and where we have an opportunity to provide input. In this previous year, 2015, 2 SAC meetings were scheduled. 1 meeting was canceled. 1 meeting was held for approximately 2 hours. For an issue that affects 3 million people in the state of Pennsylvania, is 2 hours enough time for us to be spending reviewing issues related to the program? Since at least 2005, discussions at SAC meetings reflect a growing concern among stakeholders relating to the level of experience by department staff, as well as concern with the communication between the 537 program staff and the regulated community. This concern was only exacerbated by an assertion by DEP personnel during a 2008 SAC meeting that the department, quote, had a need to stop the incessant negotiation with the stakeholders so that regulations and guidance could move forward. Input to the department relating to Act 537 program has been steadily restricted. Long-standing work groups, like the PASEO DEP work group that used to be in existence, to promote consistency and application of regulations, have been discontinued. SAC meetings have been canceled for lack of agenda items, and even SAC agenda items proposed by various SAC chairpersons have been rejected by DEP. It is further disconcerting that changes are regularly made to approvals for alternate on-lot technologies without notification to the SAC or the SEO community at large. It's up to us to discover the updated documents. So blatant is this practice that a SAC meeting was convened on November 5th of 2014 with no mention by DEP of an alternate technology approval revision that was posted to DEP's website the very next day. Again, 3 million people are affected. The SEO community is not notified. Not only has communication been restricted, the utilization of the SAC has been inefficient at best. Within the last 10 years, SAC has been asked to invest copious amounts of time reviewing guidance documents that have either never been finalized or have been superseded by legislation due to concerns with the DEP end product. Additionally, SAC has comprehensively reviewed draft versions of Chapters 71, 72, and 73, the regulations that are promulgated by the Act, in 2 separate regulatory revision review campaigns during 2007 and 2009. It's telling to note that SAC work groups met during the 2009 campaigns on 7 separate occasions, investing hundreds of man-hours on a volunteer basis with no tangible result. Most recently, as a result of continued requests by SAC and the Citizens Advisory Council, the department drafted proposed targeted revisions to Chapters 71, 2, and 3 as their answer to a request to allow for sustainable economic growth through new land development with alternate technologies, an issue that you have or will be hearing much more about from others who are testifying. The SAC reviewed these documents and provided comment to the department, only to be told that the revisions were being set aside in favor of yet another comprehensive revision to all 3 chapters. I'm sure you can imagine the giddy anticipation of the SAC membership to invest many more hours commenting after their previous investments have been so richly rewarded. It has become abundantly clear to me that the only way to effect change in the 537 program, which has become almost exclusively a reactionary creature, is to engage understanding legislative forces or to be financially secure enough to bring an appeal to the Environmental Hearing Board, thereby forcing the necessary change. I'm convinced that if the SAC had the resources necessary to mount an Environmental Hearing Board appeal, the alternate technologies for new land development issue would have been resolved long ago. While a number of administrations have come and gone over the last 10 years, current management of the 537 program has remained largely intact. Threat of isolationism and resistance to public input that is apparent to this SAC chairman and was previously identified by a sitting SAC chairman at the time in May 2006 during testimony to the House Policy Committee. This threat of isolationism and resistance to public input is one of the greatest challenges facing improvements to Act 537 and its related regulations. As an example of this attitude of DEP that has been felt directly by certain citizens, one particular non-proprietary technology approved by DEP in 2002, the free access gravity sand filter, has been shown to be problematic with significant numbers of failures. This technology utilized a loading rate that was called into question repeatedly, and which the department themselves admitted was too high as early as 2004. Yet they allowed the systems to be utilized without further restriction until 2014. Hundreds, if not thousands, of these systems were installed by unsuspecting homeowners, and when asked publicly at a recent conference about recourse for these homeowners who now own the failing systems and for which approval has been rescinded, department personnel responded that there was no plan to compensate them. What are these persons or persons who experience this breach of public trust in the future to do? I'm reminded of when I worked at the Peach Bottom Atomic Power Station in the 1980s. Operators of the plant were found sleeping on the job, and the facility was ordered to be temporarily shut down. by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. There was significant management shakeup prior to the plant being allowed to restart because, according to the NRC, management knew or should have known what was occurring there. I submit that there's been an intentional effort by DEP to resist legitimate, not busy work input, but legitimate input from outside the department, causing unfortunate circumstances and unnecessary delays to needed change. I largely agree with the items that Mr. Ongst raised today, and we're not rejecting those items. We want to be part of the process. But Senators, I submit to you that authority minus accountability is a dangerous mixture in the hands of a bureaucrat in the public sector. That concludes my testimony. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I have a general question. When you do a review, whether it's of regulations or any particular situation, and you submit, I don't know, your findings or your recommendations to DEP, is that in writing?
It is a requirement of the Act that we submit those comments in writing to the Secretary, who shall give due consideration to those comments according to the Act.
Is there, and I just don't know this, and I should know it, but I don't, is there any requirement in the Act that when you submit them to the Secretary, you submit them to the respective oversight committees from the Senate and the House?
There is no requirement of the Act to do that. The advisory committee's role, as we have been reminded repeatedly by the department, is just an advisory committee. And the Act itself does not require us to do anything more than submit comments to the Secretary.
Well, I mean, just off the top of my head, it would seem to me that that would be something interesting that maybe, you know, a committee like this would be interested in, is to follow what's going on and what's being recommended.
Can I take that as an offer?
That's just a thought at this point.
We would be delighted to forward those comments on to the appropriate legislative bodies.
All right. Thank you. Senator Hutchinson.
Thank you. First, I wanted to ask, it was brought up by the previous testifier about the size and the composition of your committee, and wanted to hear your thoughts about that. If you think that is way out of whack, slightly out of whack, or you think it's fine as is, and you know, do you have any comments about what kind of things we should do? You know, the particular thing that he really talked about was how big it is, and I understand that if you get too many people in the room, it's useless, and maybe that's. Maybe I'm reading between the lines, but is that why they sort of ignore what you do? They just don't want to get involved with this, so they just push you guys aside. Is it? Please talk about the subject for me.
I would be ill-equipped to discuss why.
I know that. I know that.
They may do a certain
Sure.
thing. However, I do agree with Mr. Ongst that the committee does, or the composition of the committee does bear further review. And perhaps the size of it is too large. I think, as you discussed, Mr. Chairman, early on, we've got a 50-year-old act. And at the time, that committee composition made sense. But there certainly is, this could be an opportunity for us to review who sits on that committee, what organizations are represented, and perhaps make that more of a living portion of the act, so that the appropriate organizations can be represented going forward, particularly if it takes a good number of years for the act to be revised again.
I was also curious by a statement in your testimony, and I'm sure you have the backup for it, but and here it is. I wasn't aware personally. It's that you said Pennsylvania is the only state that has a formal legislated and regulated sewage planning program.
Yes.
I was sort of almost shocked to hear that.
In discussion,
Any idea what other states do, or you just know that that's true, and you don't know what other states do?
I don't know what other states do, other than this statement came from a former DEP deputy secretary who told me that that was the case, and he's a man of impeccable character. I thought it was interesting to note that.
Yes, it is.
Because sewage planning is a large part of this process, very important part of the process. Also provides many opportunities for points of friction.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your service on the committee also, and you know, hopefully we can make it more worthwhile for your service on that committee. So thank you.
Thank you, and I don't want to leave this committee with a misunderstanding. We desperately want to work with the department to the benefit of the residents of the Commonwealth. And perhaps what you're hearing from me is merely a plea to engage us. Let us be part of that process. Don't consider us to be a hurdle that you need to overcome. There's a lot of experience represented on that committee, and I think that the residents of the Commonwealth could benefit greatly if it was utilized.
Senator Bartolotta.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, and I apologize for being late. I had a prior meeting. I know that you report directly to the Secretary of the DEP. However, are there any instances that you can recall or have been reported to you where there's a difference in the way matters are treated depending upon the area, say the southwest versus southeast or northeast, as far as those particular DEP departments go?
I think it would be fair to say that regional differences are a well-known hurdle that the department does themselves seek to overcome. So there are, with 6 different regions in the state, there are often 6 different interpretations of the regulations. And not only that, within the Commonwealth, I believe there are over 2,500 municipalities, and you can get almost 2,500 different interpretations of the regulations from that perspective. Mm-hmm. So not only regionally, but municipality to municipality, different interpretations are made.
So in your opinion, do you think that, if we were going to be addressing this particular act, that some sort of attention should be made to making, for lack of a better term, the same playbook for all of the Commonwealth to follow as far as DEP regulations and permitting goes?
Consistency is essential, and I feel certain, and I don't mean to speak for the department here, but I think they would agree with that they would love to see the act and the regulations consistently applied region to region, municipality to municipality. Unfortunately, that's a very difficult task.
Thank you.
Just a question about, you have 30 members, I think that's what's on this committee now?
Roughly 30.
When you have a meeting, how many people show up, or how many people participate?
We almost always have a quorum, which is, by our bylaws, 1/3 of the members. But more often than not, we have at least half of the 30 members there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We appreciate your comments, and we'll obviously take them into consideration.
Thank you for your time.
The next presenter is the Elam Herr from the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator. Senator, since everyone has my testimony, if you don't mind, I will deviate from that and address a couple of the areas specifically, and also some of the comments that were made from the previous 2 presenters. Also, the panels that are coming up later today will be more specific in the areas I think you would rather hear from them than special the generalities that I will talk about. As you well know, our association represents the majority of the landmass within the Commonwealth, which deals both with the facilities, the plants that are handling the waste, as well as the on-lot systems. And Act 537 addresses both issues. This has, over the years, created some of the problems that we have seen. When I started with the association in the mid-'70s, and this gets back to one of the statements that the Deputy Secretary made with the regulatory process, we had a township in western PA where the department was mandating that the township put in a facility of, at that time, approximately $12.5 million for 250 households. You do the math, and you can see how that would not be feasible. And in today's circumstances, with the cost, and even if you did raise the number of households, you would still see that if municipalities are forced to put in systems of that caliber, it just would not be feasible, and the residents would have an unfair burden. It also gets down to part of the comments that the Deputy Secretary was making about updating the plans every 10 years. Actually, that isn't a bad recommendation. The problem is, over the last number of years, the amount of money that the state has put into the budgets for sewage planning and sewage enforcement has been eliminated. And so the end result is it comes down to a mandate on to the municipalities to do any type of planning and enforcement without going and putting it on to either people who are putting in systems or under the taxpayers. That does become a substantial mandated requirement, especially in some parts of the state where development has been very limited over the years, and maybe 10 years isn't the right criteria to say that a plan needs to be updated. So from that standpoint, we are looking at that the future plan updates should have some type of criteria that would establish the need and when they should be taking place. The sewer systems, again, realize that Pennsylvania has a very rural population and does not have the ability to put in centralized sewer systems. Now, again, the Deputy Secretary had indicated that they would like to have a more regional approach, and in some cases that is recommended, and we do that with having authorities, creating authorities because of the financial obligations that it would take, which end up addressing numerous municipalities' sewage problems. The problem is in certain areas that does not work within the Commonwealth, and you do have to put individual systems in. And although people should talk, people should work together when it is feasible, a lot of times that does not come down and cannot happen per se. The Secretary also mentioned, and it's in the testimony, about the 10-acre exemption. 10-acre exemption, again, is twofold. One, as the Secretary did say, it was to address the areas where property owners had large tracts of land and should be able to put systems on that does not go through the entire permitting process. Our organization for years have said if it's going to be done and the criteria has to be met, then those entities should be able to, I should say those individuals who wanted that exemption should be required to pay a reasonable cost. Again, the Act addresses that and says if an SEO goes out, it's only $25 to approve that the system that is being put on meets the minimum requirements. Now, you can argue whether 10-acre exemption is good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not here to say that. I'm just saying that if it is being allowed and it's mandated on the municipalities, we should be able to recoup our cost for the 10-acre exemption that is out there. The other thing that's also been a problem, and that's with holding tanks. Again, the department does not allow holding tanks, basically, for developments. And we're not saying that holding tanks should be a permitted long-term type of system, but in certain areas of the state, the use of a holding tank for properties that were created prior to 1972 should be allowed as a viable alternative with requirements that they have to be pumped regularly, which as you can imagine, if it's a holding tank, it can only hold so much. But it would make certain properties out there viable for use. Again, we have to look at the entire state, and you just cannot look at the microcosmic system of around populated areas and think what it is in the rest of the Commonwealth. We still have one of the largest rural populations in the country. Alternative and experimental systems, again, it was discussed. Those systems are being used in other states. There is no reason why they should not be allowed and being used in Pennsylvania. I would agree again with the Deputy Secretary in this part where they should be properly vetted, researched, proved, and then be used out there. You don't want to allow somebody to put a system in today that 10, 20 years down the road just totally malfunctions, more so than just a mild type of leak or something, that there's property, which is still looked at as our castle, is no longer viable. If a system, theoretically, if a system malfunctions and can't be fixed, we can remove, we being the municipalities, the occupancy permit for that property. That is a very strict penalty for somebody who put something in under the assumption that it was going to work. So we feel on both cases, one, alternative systems should be allowed instead of just a conventional system that's put in, or sand mounds, so that property owners can use their property for what they had intended originally. But again, as I said, we do support the idea that they should be properly approved before being used. Disagree, though, with the Deputy Secretary as far as the enforcement mechanism procedures that are out there. It is ironic, and I will, truth in advertising here. For years, PSATs had contracted with the department to do training for sewage enforcement officers going through the process. We would provide the training. They would then take a test that the state would conduct and, quote unquote, be certified to do it. A few years ago, that was discontinued. Now, sewage enforcement officers still have to take the test to be certified, but the training that we put on that was basically designed and approved by the department is no longer out there. Now, whether we should be doing it or somebody else, I don't know, but there should be uniform training so that these officers, sewage enforcement officers, the individuals, when they get certified, they can, function the way the department wants them to operate. Regional offices. Senator brought up about the uniformity. I've been with the association since 1976. One of the first things I heard in 1976 is about the ununiformed interpretation of regulations by the department, not only in this program, but throughout the regions. I can tell you in recent years, our members have pushed for the uniformity of interpretation of regulations by the department's regional districts. It's still an issue out there, not only on this subject, but throughout the department. And if we could have uniformity, it'd be great. What we hear constantly is where two townships are on the opposite sides of the line, where one's in one district, the other's in the other district. One can do this, the other one can't. And I don't necessarily blame it completely on the central, because we have talked, the central office, because we have talked to the secretaries, be it Republican or Democratic administration, they agree, but somewhere between 16th floor of the DEP building and out into the regions, something gets lost. So the end result, Mr. Chairman, is that we have worked over the years on the changes that were put into Act 37 We would also agree that if you're going to look at Act 37, it should be comprehensive and look at it. We contend our members do a very good job working with what they have. We contend that the sewage enforcement officers that are out there doing their function are working. We will also contend that our sewage, our operators, whether they be in authorities or municipal-owned system, are meeting the requirements. But the ability to work with the department needs to be improved in order that we can provide safe environmental standards. For that, Mr. Chairman, as you know, once you've read the testimony, if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, but I'll also try to answer any questions today.
One thing that you mentioned that alternative systems that are being used in other states that aren't approved or aren't being used here. Can you give me an example? What are we talking about?
I cannot give you today an example, but I can get it to you. Over the years, I think it's Delaware Valley College has been doing testing on alternate systems, and it seems that and those systems that they're testing are being used in other states. And then the department basically recognizes them as a viable alternative, but it doesn't seem to make it from there out to the field with our members. I will, when I go back to the office, somebody who's more knowledgeable on this subject than me, I will get that information for you.
Yeah, I'd just like to know, some examples. And I mean, I read a lot of the publications that come out, whether it's from the township or other, boroughs association, and I'm kind of a motorhead, so I like to see what the equipment is and what's out there and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd appreciate that.
I will do that.
One other, just a comment, and I think that virtually everybody has presented so far has raised this issue about the 7 parts of DEP. There's the 6 regional offices in Harrisburg, and about the uniformity of decision making. I know years ago as a lawyer I ran into that, and I know that we had a DEP secretary, several previous ones to where we are now, that tried to concentrate and tried to resolve that. And I know that there was a lot of pushback from organizations out in the field that didn't like that idea, that there was being more centralized in Harrisburg, so that there was consistency in decision making.
I'm not asking for everything to come back to the central office for a decision that needs to be made. What we're saying is that if a certain regulation is viable or is working in one region, and you just go to the neighboring region and they turn it down, there is something wrong there. If the regulation says that Senator Wall can do this here, and he has property on the other region,
right,
why can't he do it over there? And we have heard that very specific thing for some of our members who have property in one specifically has property in Lancaster County where he lives, and he has property up in Potter County. And basically going for one same thing in both counties, one he was approved, the other one he wasn't.
Yeah, 2 different results.
2 different results. And so I don't want it to have to come to Harrisburg central office for them to give their stamp of approval each time. But when they hear something like that, it's why? How can we address that issue?
Yeah, I don't think that it was the idea that Harrisburg had to approve everything. It was that somehow that Harrisburg would say, if this is approved in Lancaster, then it should be the same in Potter County or wherever.
Or vice versa.
Or right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Hutchinson.
Thank you. Elam, if you could just comment a little bit about, I know people talk about intermunicipal cooperation, and the DEP suggested that a more robust involvement of counties and their planning commissions in the process. They think that would help with the regional cooperation kind of thing. But I also know that I really think in the end, 99% of it, it's about the economics, and that forces it or doesn't force it. And if an outside, if the locals don't believe the economics drive that cooperation, they're not going to do it. So, do you think a county level, bigger county level part of this process helps that, or would your members, as I said, I think most of your members try their very best to do what economically works for their folks. How do we balance that out?
First of all, our members, if it was mandated to go to the county level, since they're the ones that have to do the plans and the enforcement, they would have some consternation with that mandate coming.
I would think.
I would say that from the standpoint, because our members who have zoning and subdivision work with the county, from that standpoint, would have no problem with working with the county for input, cooperation, a facilitator for discussions. I don't think that's an issue. I think the issue is when they come down to it and they look at, as you said, the economics of it. Is it economically feasible? The Deputy Secretary referenced some municipalities where the cooperation has worked, and you don't know the circumstances of that particular situation. But in other cases where he mentioned across the river, when you already have 6 facilities that are there, the lines that are run for those systems, it may not be at this time economically feasible to interconnect. The upgrades to one centralized system for the 6 may be more costly than upgrades to the individual 6 at this time. There are other things that are happening with the whole sewage issue that's coming down the pike because of the Chesapeake Bay in this area and other environmental issues from the federal government. Again, economics is the big issue. I mean, years ago, when the department had the mentality at the time that every inch of this state had to have a sewer plant, and the example I used earlier, I mean, they're probably, and I don't remember since it was so long ago, whether running a line to another already existing facility may have been a better system than saying you have to put in a $12.5 million plant. I live in Lancaster County. I know there's some parts of Lancaster County that to connect parts of that county to existing systems would be economically, infeasible for those people who are going to pay for it. It's not cheap. You can ask the Authorities Association about the upgrades that they had to do to their systems to meet the Chesapeake Bay requirement along the Susquehanna. Running those facilities are very expensive.
Thank you. That's
Senator Bartolotta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Just a couple of questions. In your testimony, you had mentioned when you were speaking about enforcement of the regulations that the municipalities used to provide training for the sewage enforcement officers, but now they don't.
We used to have a contract with the department to provide SEO training,
Okay.
which the curriculum was produced and approved by the department. So if any one of us would go in and take that training, we then should be able to take the test, which we did not provide. That was provided by either the department or a third party that department had hired, and pass it.
And get a certificate.
And
for
then
the
you would get your become an SEO, yes, Certified Sewage Enforcement Officer.
So as a result of not training them now, what is the result of that? You just have none of them? You have none of these certified officers?
We still have a training program that we put on, but it is not, the curriculum is not approved by the department anymore. We're not under contract. Anybody can provide the training. The only thing that the department still requires is that an individual take the exam to become a certified sewage enforcement officer.
But that exam is still the same for everyone, am I right?
I would presume it's still the same exam, but yes, everyone would take the same exam.
Okay, but so they're still becoming certified?
Yes, they are becoming certified.
Okay, and when you were mentioning the non-uniformity of the DEP regulations, and your example was Senator Yaw has property in two sides of, split down the middle from two different DEP regions. And in one, there's certain regulations that you have to follow, and another one, they're completely different, that may be punitive or difficult. Again, what I've been telling people, where do you think a developer is going to go? They're going to go to where they can get their permit quicker, where they are used to, the certain kinds of regulations, they're familiar, and they've dealt with them before. So I think that's a mission we should all take a look at, is to try to get some kind of uniformity. So there's no surprises. I mean, if anybody wants to come into the Commonwealth and develop a property for manufacturing, for a strip mall, for a home development area, they should at least know what they're getting into.
One thing to keep in mind, it's the interpretation of the regulations that need to be uniform. The Commonwealth and the soils that we have are different. You go from Lancaster out to where you live, the soils are different. Okay, you will have some differences there, but it's how those regulations are interpreted, which is what the SEO has to do in compliance. But again, the SEOs are responsible not only back to the municipality, but really back to the department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Chairman.
your participation today and your comments. The next presenters are the Pennsylvania Sewage Enforcement Officers Association, Chris Wood, Roger Lehman, and Jim Sanders. What I would, since we're already about 20 minutes behind schedule, I would ask if you can in any way hit the highlights of what you want to say. I don't want to stop anybody from giving us the really good information, but if there's any way you can highlight it, we would appreciate it.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for letting us address the committee. Again, my name is Chris Wood. I'm the current president of PSEO. This is Roger Lehman, our past president, and on this side is Jim Sanders, our former president and longtime officer of the board. We represent over 400 SEOs who administer and do the actual work of the program in the field. We can break our groups down in two categories. Those of us who issue permits and do the testing, permitting, and inspection work for the municipalities, and those employed in the private sector who essentially help property owners to navigate through the regulations by performing some of the test, by preparing sewage designs, by sometimes working with municipalities on things that are outside the current act, such as inspecting existing systems for maintenance programs. Our position is unique because we are between the department and the property owners. We have to deal with the people on the everyday basis. We have to look at and say, how can these people do these things? How can we help them? Because we're more in touch with what goes on the property owner basis. We have some concerns about the definitions, which we have put into the writing here, particularly qualified registered professional engineer and geologist, in that they really are not involved in the mapping and classification of soils, and we prefer to see the sections of the act that relate to them be limited to qualified soil scientist. Qualified soil scientist definition needs to be updated, and again, you can talk with the Soil Scientists Association for more information on that. We also believe that the Sewage Advisory Committee can be better utilized by the state. We also feel that it should be reduced in number and remove the organizations that are not participants. My own personal experience on it shows that there are two groups of people who attend the meetings on a frequent basis: those who are actively involved in the program and those who oftentimes are just there to take notes and see what's going on. And the people who are involved with the program have a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge that can be put to better use by the state. We have a problem to a certain degree. We feel that operations and maintenance of sewage systems is necessary, that you need to pump the systems and ensure that they are functioning correctly. However, we do, as I say, we relate to the common people out there, have to deal with them on a daily basis and not sitting in an ivory tower. We have to look at the fact that some systems in the pre-regulatory days were not designed to be opened and maintained. And by actually opening the systems, you will cause them to collapse in upon themselves and destroy it. So as a typical government, we're here to protect you. In the process, we destroy you. So we feel that it's simple to say we need operations and maintenance, but it's a more complex issue than that. And we need to look at how it would affect the pre-regulatory systems, as well as people like senior citizens and others on a fixed income who may be functioning there, have systems functioning correctly now. But on the other hand, by putting them in a program would require excessive maintenance expenses for them because they don't need the maintenance the same way as somebody with a family of 10. Again, it's a complicated issue, and we just don't want to see it said, from now on, there's O&M. We agree with the need to look at official plans, maybe every 10 years, maybe at a longer time. Many areas have not changed enough to warrant a new official plan, but it wouldn't hurt to look at them periodically and just make sure that's true. Reimbursements is a tricky subject with us. Many of our members feel that they should have reimbursement for the administration of the Act. Many of us accept the fact that there won't be money for that administration. If it's not to be reimbursed in the future, we'd like that the Senate consider adding reimbursement grants, because sometimes municipalities get in some trouble, not caused by their own actions, and result in an unusually hardship to the money situation. I'm familiar with one borough who basically told their SEO when he took somebody to court, make sure you win because we can't afford the lawyer otherwise. Now, I'm not saying that all municipalities are like that, but some smaller municipalities may get into some heavy legal expenses defending the act and the regulations. We also ask, and this is something that's been making rounds lately, that the act amend what is considered a violation. Right now, backed up sewage systems, if the sewage system's clogged and it doesn't come onto the ground surface, does not come into waters of the Commonwealth, but backs up into the structure, technically is not a violation. And where most homeowners want to get it fixed right away, we do have problems with absentee landlords and apartment owners who are not maintaining this. And in many rural municipalities, your SEO is your only enforcement officer to really get involved there, short of them taking the landowner to court and a long drawn-out process. If systems that are backing up can be considered a violation, that would be very beneficial to the people out there. Most of us agree that the 10-acre permit exemption should be eliminated. It's beyond its time. Pollution doesn't really worry about the acreage. If you're contaminating the water, you're contaminating the water. If it is to remain, consensus holds that the price charged by the Act for the SEO's involvement should be raised probably at least to $200. Again, we would like to see streamlining of the systems, alternate systems, technology used in other states that has been proven with regulations and rules that are similar to ours in soils and temperatures similar to ours should be fast-tracked for us to use them. The current system right now deters people from bringing technology from out of state into our state. And you just avoid Pennsylvania because it's not worth the effort. Soil modeling, section 7.2, there is a provision that was placed in 1995 that allows people with modeling, soil modeling as it's referred to, redoxamorphic features, to build on soils if they do a perk test. And the perk test passes, and they go through some things that are required by the Act. Right now, we have many systems that are allowed on 10-inch limiting zones. that's pretty good. If you don't have 10 inches of usable soil, you probably shouldn't be building there for other reasons. You're probably in a wetlands or something else. So we would like to see that eliminated. However, if it's kept in place, the person who makes the determination should be a professional soil scientist and not an SEO, engineer, or geologist. Because you need somebody who can certify that that mottling is not indicative of water table today. And an SEO and the other two parties are not qualified to do that. The Section 8, powers and duties of local agencies, needs to be amended to take into account the variety of means that municipalities run the program. And I'm not talking the differences in regions and all. I'm talking that some municipalities do their own testing, some have consultants do the testing. And the time limits and all make it difficult when a consultant does it. If you want to go with a strict Section 8 ruling, you're pretty much going to throw out a lot of private sector employees and put it into government sector employees, which a lot of municipalities do not want to do. So it should give us some flexibility when you're dealing with consultants. Also, we request that the provisions of House Bill 632, the SEO due process bill, be included into the penalty section to avoid some abuse that's happened in a few DEP regions where they started using civil penalties for things that in many cases were simple clerical errors. And finally, I would like to bring to the Senate's attention that we are on the verge of having a problem with not enough SEOs out there. We sitting here are among the young guys in the profession right now. And I'm going to tell you, we're not all that young. Now, not enough people are getting in. There's a lot of different reasons. Makes no sense to go through the training, pass the test if there's no jobs available. And I'm not about to give mine up right now for somebody else to take it just to get new SEOs in a position. However, there are other things working against us, such as the fact that many municipalities are laying off or consolidating over larger areas. And this is fine now when you have an SEO doing maybe 20 municipalities, but when things get busy again and he decides he's got to reduce his area, who's going to take the other municipalities? And when you do, you're going to get somebody straight out of training who is not going to be as qualified and not going to know all the other types of systems and not be able to do the work up to the level that's necessary. So again, it's just something we would like to bring to the attention. That's a quick summary of what we have listed here. We are open to questions, and again, if I don't say it later, we always welcome you to contact our association to ask any questions or any help that we may give you in crafting legislations, understanding policies, or things of that nature.
I thank you, and I thank you for your presentation. I reviewed this prior to the hearing, and going through and actually pointing out the sections and what you think should be done is very, very beneficial and helpful. I have a question now in your testimony. You indicated that the real problems lie in the regulations and policies promulgated to administer the act, which vast changes are necessary. Now, I guess a couple of preliminary comments. If the act is amended, and the regulations are necessarily going to have to be changed, but what do you see as the problem with the regulations now on the current act? And you don't have to go through the regulations, but is there a philosophy issue here, or what is it?
When you guys want to take it?
I can take that. I think that what I would term it as is that, and I believe it begins with the act, that the act does not provide for enough flexibility. Again, we have an act here that's approaching 50 years old that has not, over its 50 years, allowed for enough flexibility on the part of the department to promulgate regulations that can keep up with the newer technologies. I think even as the prior speakers have indicated, the need to be able to bring newer technologies into Pennsylvania, DEP, I think, is part of the problem is they're held back by the act because not enough flexibility in the act. And the act should be written in such a way, it needs to be, I think Dwayne Mowry indicated, should use the term living document. I think it has to be more of a living document as opposed to the static document that it really is today. So a lot of our concerns with respect to what's in the regulations come from the fact that the act itself does not provide for enough flexibility.
Okay.
Jim?
All right, thank you. Over. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it, and like I said, I really appreciate the way that you laid out your testimony, and it's very helpful. That I think in outline form, so that really helps me. Thank you. The next presenters are the Pennsylvania Realtors Association, Robert Wood, a broker owner of the Real Estaters of Mansfield. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name's Robert Wood. I'm from Tioga County. I've been in the real estate profession since 1973. As a realtor, I've learned about all types of soils and about how and where we dispose of sewage in the Commonwealth. I've served on the Sewage Advisory Committee as the appointee of the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors for nearly 20 years, representing its 30,000 members. I hope my 20 years on there doesn't offend anybody in the room. The Pennsylvania Association of Realtors has a long-standing reputation of representing the needs of consumers, whether they be residential, commercial, or agricultural. We believe that consumers' needs, particularly in rural areas, have been dramatically impacted by the lack of additional reasonable sewage system options. In our role on the SAC, we've worked tirelessly to produce balanced alternatives for consumers who want to develop rural land while continuing to be environmentally conscientious. By not allowing the use of alternate sewage systems for planning purposes, current and future homeowners are being hindered on occasion from building a new home. Most people assume locating suitable sites for building is easy. In my area, 90% of the properties would require pressure dose sand mounds at this time. The cost to build the alternate systems is dramatically higher and often prohibitive. In my area, the cost of a pressure dose sand mount is normally $8,000 to $12,000 versus $15,000 to $25,000 for alternate systems. The costs alone will alleviate an overabundance of the number of the alternate systems being built, which appears to be a DEP concern at this time. An example, I tested a 100-acre site that did not qualify for any of the regular systems. Primarily, it was due to clay-based soils, which are prominent in my area of the state, and normally have depths to limiting zones of 10 to 14 inches to rock or high water table. The remainder was eliminated by slope, stream, or wetlands conditions. Many times, the suitable site located for a pressure dose sand mound is so far away from existing roads or utilities that it is economically impossible for consumers to afford to build a home in that location. Tragically, we've seen other examples of children inheriting land that their families gave to them and failed to do a perk test on, and find that it doesn't perk for a pressure dose mound or a conventional system. If an alternate were to be allowed, they would have something that would be buildable whether they chose to do it or someone else did. We also have examples, a lot of ag in my area of the state. A lot of high-quality farmlands being used because it has suitable sites for pressure dose mounds due to the soil types. Oquagas, red shales, all the time. They're great for farming, but they make great sewage systems. By allowing a system in less attractive soil types, we would save high-quality farmland for agricultural purposes. Much of the land in my area does not qualify for in-ground systems like many of you may be familiar with. Approximately 5 out of 100 properties in my area qualify for such a system. Much of that would be in a floodplain, which, again, if it was in floodway, it would be totally eliminated, and if it was in flood fringe, you would face much higher costs to build there, and we don't encourage that. Preventing alternative systems from being approved for planning purposes is not in the best interest of our constituents. Extensive research on this topic has been completed by Del Val with huge amounts of empirical data. This isn't new. These systems have been vetted. They've been tested in every part of the state and all the soil types. Because of that research, we believe it's prudent to either require or legislate regulatory change at this time, allowing their use for the creation of new lots in the planning process. The Pennsylvania Association of Realtors asks for your help as it relates to the alternate sewage systems issue and your support addressing this issue at this point in history. These systems work. As I said, they've been vetted by Del Val, and that empirical data exists. If you don't believe a legislative solution is feasible, we suggest that you would immediately ask DEP to once again allow the surgical correction which SAC previously requested as it relates to the use of alternate sewage systems for planning purposes. At this time, we would continue to work on a complete review of Act 537, and I've got to reinforce one other thing that was said here. In the last 4 years, we've reviewed line item by line item at chapters 71, 72, and 73. It's sitting in a database at the department. It has line item in color, overviews of what we said to each section, and was handed over by the SAC after numerous. The man hours were immense by people that know what they're talking about in their field. Where did it go? It's sitting there. One last comment that I think is relevant. We talk about failing systems in the state, but from my perspective, selling real estate for 42 years, the majority of the failing on-site systems were not permitted systems. They were existing housing stock prior to the on-site permitting process started on May 15th, 1972. These are being systematically repaired and replaced due to the agreements of sale used today, calling for home inspections and system inspections prior to closing, and that those septic systems upgrades occur before closing or money is taken out to do it by permit post-closing when weather permits. So we're not getting more failing systems, and it's not permitted ones that are the main problem. It's the existing housing stock before the permitting process. That's important to know, and that's being improved on a regular basis year in and year out. I appreciate the opportunity, and I would love to answer questions you may have.
Could you give me, and I know I've asked this before, give me an example of this alternative system or an alternate system that, you know, Delaware Valley has tested and...
Well, the Elgins is a sample. They tested all the alternates that we're looking at right now.
Okay,
so
well,
if they were named, but let's take an Elgin. You have to have it designed by, the testing has to be done by a soil scientist, and the system design has to be approved by someone certified to that level. It can't be just done by any SEO. These will work on 10 inches or more, and they are laid out to fit the number of bedroom house that's going to be placed on the property. At the current systems, most people don't know this, all 1 to 3 bedroom homes have the same size leach field. When you go to the 4th bedroom, the 5th bedroom, the leach field increases in size. These systems are designed for the home being permitted, and I do not believe the failure rate on these is, they're working. These systems being put in new at much higher costs are working, and they're not going to proliferate. They're going to alleviate hardships at that point in that area, and particularly home repairs. But there's no reason they can't be used for the creation of a new lot and a new home because they work.
I know, but my question is, what do they look like? Are they tanks? Are they...
It's a 2-compartment tank. You have longer system laid out in a grid that maybe is a trench, and they're slightly different. So instead of the high mound, you have a little lower concoction, and it works scientifically a little different than the others we're more familiar with.
Okay, that's what I was interested in, or whether there's certain new kind of bugs you put in it or whatever.
No.
Okay.
And all these systems now, the majority of them, other than a spray, which is usually used as an alternative, it's not built. Many people permit a system in order to wait to put in a fill site and build a system 3 years down the road. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on to get to where we can create this lot or do something to use something effectively without that inherent fear that it's going to fail or produce contamination to the waters of the Commonwealth.
Thanks, Scott. Senator Hutchinson.
Just wanted to touch base on one thing, and although I think every single testifier has talked about alternative systems and the need for more options, quicker options, all that kind of stuff, and I'm a huge believer in that. We also did have one testifier who talked about a technology that was approved and now it no longer works, and people are stuck with these systems. And I don't know how we balance that. I mean,
I was trying to pick up on what system
even
it was.
To even imply that somehow the agency that approved that technology is somehow liable for that after the fact, like, blows my mind. But that's why I think there's this struggle between new systems and approval versus same old, same old. Could you just comment on that a little bit?
Well, I was trying to pick up on what the system was that failed. The ones I'm discussing and the ones that I think are on the table for approval are nowhere near that category. And again, the science exists, and I'm not saying I'm pointing out that I do not believe they'll proliferate. I think they're needed at a point in time, and in some of the cases, like I've suggested here, to make economic sense and someone's willing to pay the economic penalty to put in a system that's going to work in a different location to solve a different problem at that time. And that's not, the ones I profess to want the department to approve are going to work.
Well, I'm 1,000% in your boat, but I just wanted to raise the issue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
The next presenter is Bruce Willman from the Pennsylvania Association of Professional Soil Scientists. Good morning, sir.
Morning. And thank you, Chairman Yaw and Yabba Jack, and the members of the committee for inviting us to testify. I'm going to try to be accommodating and abbreviate testimony to some degree. My name is Bruce Willman again. I'm a certified professional soil scientist.
Are the excuse me? Is the green light on?
Get my eyesight here. On this one it is. Let me take this one. Is that better?
Okay.
My name is Bruce Willman. I'm a certified professional soil scientist. I have been for nearly 30 years and member of the Pennsylvania Association of Professional Soil Scientists. This is our 40th year, and we are consistently providing technical information and services to regulations and so forth. And we appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony regarding the Act 537 plan. Soils are particularly important in this act due to the on-lot sewage program nature relying on the soils for treatment and disposal. Regards to the Act, it has been a useful tool and comprehensive over the years, but it has been dated, as previous testimonies have mentioned. There are certain things that need to be updated, and we agree with a lot of the comments that have already been presented in previous testimonies. We have also been involved in previous reviews with the legislature and the department on trying to get changes made to accommodate this act. This also includes the regulations promulgated under the act, but specifically, I can mention a few issues with the act that we're going to recommend. One of the problems that we have had in the past is when we go try to revise regulations, there's some language in the act that prevents the changes from being recommended, and that's been presented before as one of the items that needs to have the act updated from its current state. Over a third of the Pennsylvania residents rely on on-site septic systems. That's 25% of the households. And as a result, there used to be just the typical stone and pipe drainage system requiring 4 feet of suitable soil. And what has changed is in the last 25 years, we've actually had these alternate systems that can allow soils with at least 10 inches of suitable soil depth to be used. And as we discussed in the previous discussion, some of these alternate systems have actually been in place for 20 years. Many of the shallow limiting zone type soils have been in place for at least 10 years. And the main consideration from a soil science perspective is that the proper identification of those soil characteristics is necessary to design and accommodate whatever alternate systems that are currently available. And there are a number of approved ones for those shallow limiting zones. I would just like to go on to commenting on how the soil science and the act is important. Soil scientists provide this expert advice on the regulations or to regulators and homeowners regarding interpretations of soil and site characteristics as related to the conventional and alternate methods of sewage treatment and disposal. The role of the soil science within the Act 537 is evident with the following and provides a basis for our recommendations. Soil scientists provide site-specific evaluations and establish the soil's ability to support a proposed land use activity. For on-lot sewage disposal systems, a detailed evaluation of the site and soil characteristics is required to identify the available on-lot treatment and disposal technologies suitable for that particular site. Often a qualified soil scientist is required to provide interpretations on the suitability and overall feasibility of wastewater treatment and disposal for land development projects. The definition of a qualified soil scientist is one item that we would recommend some changes to in the Act, which is also referenced in the subsequent regulations. The role of the qualified soil scientist is prominent when certain alternate system technologies are proposed. All sites that propose on-site systems on shallow limiting zone soils are required to be evaluated by a qualified soil scientist. Current interpretations of the sewage planning regulations do not allow the use of these alternate technologies for new land development. The Act should reflect that any on-lot system technology approved by the department would be acceptable for new land development planning proposals, and as long as the specific requirements for those systems are satisfied. Another significant role of our qualified soil scientists is in sewage facility program, the evaluation of malfunctioning systems to identify repair or replacement type options, or evaluate sites with problem soil or site conditions. Soil scientist considers not only the soil profile characteristics, but the landscape position. To determine the best approved technology, the soil scientist considers the site and soil limitations to protect, that will protect these public and health considerations. Some specific act recommendations that we have that are soils related. Under the definitions, we've discussed about the qualified soil scientist. The existing definition in the act is no longer appropriate and should reflect current professional standards. The American Registry of Certified Professionals in Agronomy, Crops, and Soils has been replaced by the Council of Soil Science Examiners of the Soil Science Society of America. The definition may also need to be changed if pending legislation requiring state licensing of soil scientists becomes law. PAPS recommends the following language to be used in qualified soil scientist, identified by satisfying one of three conditions. Qualified soil scientist means a person, if legislation is adopted, registered to practice soil science in the Commonwealth, or a person certified as a professional soil scientist, CPSS, or soil classifier, CPSC, by the Soil Science Society of America, or, and this definition is similar to the current definition, a person certified as a sewage enforcement officer with 5 years of experience in the characterization, classification, mapping, and interpretation of soils as they relate to the function of on-lot sewage disposal systems, and either a Bachelor of Science or higher degree in soil science or related major from an accredited college or university. Next definitions are suggested to allow or identify what some of the language is. Limiting zones. They're talked throughout the Act and the regulations, and we feel that a simple definition should be put in the Act that reads as follows. A soil horizon is a soil profile, or this limiting zone is a soil horizon in the soil profile or underlying strata, which restricts the capability of the soil to provide adequate disposal and renovation of wastewater. The next definition we're recommending is one for redoxamorphic features, which are strictly those soil color patterns related to prolonged saturation. And the definition there, which is the technical definition, is concentration, depletions, and reduced soil matrices, and other features indicating the chemical reduction and oxidation of iron and manganese compounds resulting from prolonged saturation of the soil. And that differs to modifying the definition for soil modeling to eliminate the reference to prolonged saturation, because soil modeling encompasses all color patterns in the soil, not just related to saturation. So that definition would read soil color patterns consisting of particles of different colors or shades of color interspersed within the dominant soil color period. Again, as previously mentioned, the Sewage Advisory Committee makeup should be reviewed, and it could be, in our opinion, reduced based on members that are no longer there or associations that are no longer in effect. The section 7.2 on soil modeling. We agree with a little bit with the Sewage Enforcement Officer Association assessment in that we don't believe this section is no longer needed. This was included in the act at a time when few options were available to property owners for shallow limiting zone soils, and many permits were denied based on evidence of soil modeling at shallow depths. With the addition of many approved alternate systems for shallow limiting zone sites, PAPS believes that this section is no longer needed. This is even more apparent if the Act regulations clearly allow the use of approved alternate systems in new land development planning. In summary, we appreciate the opportunity to provide our testimony and look forward to providing any assistance in the development of legislative process down the road, as well as our continued efforts with working with the department on regulation updates. I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you. Are soil scientists required under the any part of the act now or the regulations?
They're required on certain alternate system technologies, especially those with the shallow limiting zone depths. 10 to 20 inch limiting zones are required to have qualified soil scientists evaluate those sites and provide the recommendations on the design. A lot of them are relying on hydraulic linear loading and need to have certain length to width ratios and so forth. But those are in the regulations as reference to alternate technologies.
You've indicated in your part of your written testimony that current interpretations of the sewage planning regulations do not permit the use of these approved alternate technologies for new land development. Why don't the regulations? I mean, is there something in the regulations that says, like, a specific system has to be a certain size and, you know, constructed of concrete or whatever it is, and is that the reason?
No, the reference is in the planning sections of the regulations. They refer that new sites shall meet the general site investigation criteria that are identified in another chapter of the regulations. Well, those general site characteristic criteria state that you have to have at least 20 inches of suitable soil to be suitable. Well, the shallow limiting zone alternate systems can have 10 to 20 inches of soil.
Okay, so there is a specific measurement requirement that they can't meet.
That's correct. If you go to the planning, it has to meet planning, but planning refers to the site characterization requirements that haven't been updated or changed to accommodate the alternate system technology.
And those requirements are in the regulations, or is that in the statute?
That's in the regulation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Senator Hutchinson.
Just a reference was made, even by other testifiers, about, for lack of a better term, a beefed up role for qualified soil scientists as opposed to other professions. I mean, it was even said maybe we should take the others out. The question I have is, how many soil scientists are there in Pennsylvania? And if there were to be, strictly have to use qualified soil scientists, are there enough in this state to do what would be required going forward? I mean, I don't even know. I don't know any. Do you? I mean, how many are there in Pennsylvania?
Well, in our association, there's approximately 150. not everyone in the state is in our association, obviously. And the difference between certified professional soil scientists that the Soil Science Society of America maintains, I'm not sure what the listing is, but there are certain people on the borders that work in our state as well that are certified professional soil scientists. It's been always the chicken and the egg scenario. There are soil scientists here. There certainly would be a lot more if there was a requirement that qualified certain soil scientists do certain work. There are some indications that, and often in this program, sewage enforcement officers will look at a site. They have limited training on what they're looking at, and they might not understand the soils that they're looking at, request a soil scientist come in and provide that expert opinion. Often what that does, though, is add another financial burden onto the homeowner because they thought they were getting the interpretation they needed first, and now they got to get more people involved. But problem sites result in more advanced interpretations. Numbers has always been an issue, but there are a number of consulting soil scientists throughout the state that do a fair amount of work, and we're kind of interspersed around the state at this point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
The next presenter is Julian Mazzaro, the project engineer for ELA Group from the Associated Builders and Contractors, Keystone Chapter. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the Senate Committee. My name is Julian Mazzaro. I'm a project engineer with the ELA Group, a full-service land development and engineering firm based in Lititz, Pennsylvania. I've been with the ELA Group for just over 2 years, and I've been fortunate to work with our director, Jeff Sweater, on a range of wastewater projects, including the design of wastewater treatment facilities and the development of a joint municipal Act 537 sewage facilities plan. Prior to working with the ELA Group, I spent 4.5 years with the Pennsylvania DEP, reviewing permit applications for discharges to the waters of the Commonwealth, as well as for the construction of new treatment facilities. The planning for and design of wastewater treatment infrastructure is a complex process, which requires balancing many aspects of a project, including protecting water quality and public health, with the cost to construct and maintain wastewater infrastructure itself. The Act 537 sewage facilities regulations are an effective regulatory tool, which allow municipalities to protect the groundwater and surface water in their jurisdiction, as well as plan for existing and future wastewater needs. The development of new infrastructure, whether by a municipal authority or private entity or homeowner, should be adequately reviewed at all levels to guarantee that the waters of the Commonwealth are protected and the infrastructure is effective and reliable. We at the LA Group think that the Act 537 regulations do help municipalities to meet these commitments. However, we have also found inefficiencies either in the regulations themselves or in the execution of those regulations. For example, frequently the department staff and municipal authority engineers interpret the peak sewage flows contained within Chapter 73, subsection 7317, as the only viable values for the design of non-on-lot community wastewater systems, despite the regulation's explicit statement otherwise. The Citizens Advisory Council and the Sewage Advisory Committee have identified the department's technical staff interpretation of Chapter 71, subsection 7162 regulations as approving only conventional on-lot disposal systems and not alternate systems as an impediment to approval of alternative technologies within the sewage planning process. The Council and SAC have identified the misinterpretation of subsection 7162 as a short-term goal for both the department to mitigate. The misinterpretation of these regulations, whether it be 7162 or 7317 by both private and public employees, suggests there may be a broader problem that the regulations cannot address, which is a lack of training and guidance. The department can be slow to change regulations or update guidance documents, which from my perspective is the result of a combination of lack of qualified technical personnel, a change in regulatory commitments and focus due to administration changes, and a lack of financial resources. I also think the department's slow movement can be deliberate so as to allow adequate review of the myriad issues they are confronted with. As a former DEP employee, I remember experiencing difficulties in achieving quick turnaround on permit application reviews because of cumbersome internal software, ambiguity within the applications and regulations, lack of technical personnel to review the volume of applications, poor application submittals, as well as lack of experience and instructional materials. Although there are no quick fixes for inadequate software or amending complex regulatory structures, a relatively easy fix would be to provide more frequent training for both public and private persons. I think any training provided by the department may be made more effective by including both public and private employees together to allow for a range of questions or discussions to be fielded during the training. Frequent training opportunities for both public and private employees would also help the department to meet these short-term goals. Frequent training would be beneficial to young engineers entering the wastewater field, as well as more seasoned engineers, and it would help to eliminate the ambiguity in the sewage planning process, and therefore eliminate delays and cut cost. The LA Group is also aware that the Council and SAC have identified a long-term goal of comprehensive water resources planning, in lieu of only sewage planning, as an issue the department should consider. We at the LA Group are in agreement with the Council and SAC that a more comprehensive water resources planning approach should be performed. A comprehensive water resources planning approach that includes wastewater, stormwater, and potable water would be a more effective tool and could eliminate the separate costs municipalities incur for these separate regulatory programs. Unfortunately, municipalities are not always aggressive in pursuing a comprehensive planning approach because of a lack of knowing what is required and subsequently the associated cost. This is an opportunity for both the department and the legislator to create a basic comprehensive water resource planning framework that the public can build on and eliminate regulatory and cost inefficiencies. Our experience at the LA Group also suggests that sewage planning process or future comprehensive water resources planning process would benefit from a digital application review process. The engineers within the LA Group that work on traffic-related permits have found that the PennDOT's electronic permitting system is relatively easy and quick, and it has reduced the time that it takes the engineers to acquire the highway occupancy permits. Although sewage planning is more complex than the associated highway occupancy permits, we believe creating a digital submission process can help remove ambiguity from the submission and review process. Currently, I must complete the applications and then submit the sewage planning modules to various county departments and municipal officials, and then wait for these officials to return the copies with signature. The sewage planning modules cannot be mailed out to all agencies at once. The process involves obtaining signatures from county departments first, then from the municipal officials prior to submitting to the department. The process of mailing completed applications and waiting often takes several months. Thank you for your time, Chairman, and I'm willing to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. I can't help but note that you repeat the comment that's been a pretty common theme, and that's about approval of alternate technologies that apparently Pennsylvania's kind of, I don't know what we're doing, but we're not doing that, that's for sure, which makes it very difficult on any land development or an awful lot of land developments. You make the comment in here that more comprehensive water resources planning and approach should be performed. At what level? Where do you, we've had different comments about where that should start or who should be in charge of that?
Well, certainly, I mean, obviously the municipalities, like, they take the lead with the Act 537 plans, or implementing the Act 537 plan, but we think that the department could develop regulations that would allow them to fold in maybe MS4 programs and other programs as well. So perhaps it would be best for the department to take the lead, but to have the input from some of the associations you've heard here as well as other members of the public.
Okay, thank you. Senator Hutchinson, no? All right, thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony here today. The next presenter is Thaddeus Stevens, a member of the Citizens Advisory Council. Good morning.
Good morning, Senators, and thank you for the invitation. I won't go through all of my introduction and all of that. I know we're running short on time. I think the important thing to understand, and through efforts of the Citizens Advisory Council in 2013, pardon me, I'm a little bit behind the time, we had a meeting with the Secretary of DEP discussing the very issue that has been the focus of so much testimony this morning, and that was including alternate systems in the planning process. The Secretary agreed that that seemed a worthy effort and directed staff to do that, and wasn't terribly long after that that the Secretary resigned and it stalled. We believe that's a worthy cause. We can put some of the pressure from development on, get it off prime farmland and get it into more limiting soils for farming and use other soils for placement of on-lot sewage systems. And I believe we could do that in a surgical manner in the regulation and get it done pretty promptly. I don't know why that has continued to stop. About a month ago at a Citizens Advisory Council meeting, by conference call, the Secretary said that he would not address that in a surgical repair of the regulations. He wanted to do a comprehensive review of the regulations, which I thought had already been done, and ask for comment on that and move forward. That's probably a lengthy process. This is needed. The systems work. The criteria for using the systems is reasonably efficient and effective, and there's no reason not to make that surgical correction and get it done today. With the help of the Sewage Advisory Committee, the language is available within literally hours if you chose to get that directed and completed. On a lot more comprehensive issue, we've got the overall scheme. It is an old law. I was working in the legislative hall some when it was developed, which probably reflects my age. The comprehensive review and correction, a lot of that has been testified to this morning. I'm sure there are a lot of things we could do to integrate stormwater planning and water availability and all of those things, but that is a lengthy and large process. And right now, that short-term correction could be handled and done. My suggestion would be that you get two directions. One is to make that surgical correction, get it implemented and completed, and then take on the larger process of trying to find a way to integrate all of the various pieces of legislation that have passed since 1965 that affect water and its use, and put them into a bill that begins to get us where we ought to go in a longer term. That's about all I've got for this morning. Most of what I have in my testimony you've read or are able to read, and it's repetitive for what others have said. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I would offer the resources of the Citizens Advisory Council to orchestrating and helping anywhere we can.
The surgical correction that you're talking about, is that in the regulations, or would that be a statutory change?
I'm not a lawyer, but it seems that the department feels that there is language in the regulation which prevents their inclusion of alternate systems in the planning process.
But they make the regulations themselves.
They do. And it seems to me that could be easily corrected. They then refer to matters in the act that prevent that. And without being trained in the law, I don't know where that problem is. I just know that it exists. I think it could be done regulatorily, but the department does not agree with me.
That's the, do you have any, I don't know, correspondence or memos or whatever that you've sent to the department, or that the Citizens Advisory Council has sent to the department regarding this issue that we could use for our purposes?
We can find it pretty quickly, either in our records or the Sewage Advisory Committee records. I think that we could do that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, just so we had some idea of what, what the focus is, rather than all over the place. Or
yes, I believe we could provide that promptly.
I think that would be very helpful. And I understand your suggestion. I mean, listening here today about a rewrite of Act 37 and considering all the things, and then one of the testifiers that talked about bringing MS4 in and everything else. I mean, this is like, Adam's going to lose all of his hair over this.
Yeah, and he won't be alone.
And I said, yeah, I mean, this could be quite a project. Richard, you might be included in that too. So, I really thank you for your comments today. Senator Hutchinson. I want to thank everybody for your participation today. All of this testimony and video will be on my website, which it's not a magic number. It's www.senatorgeneyaw.com, and it's pretty easy to find. And a lot of times, I know after you sit through a hearing and then you go back and I actually watch some of these and you pick up little things that somebody said that you may have missed while you're sitting here, and it's very beneficial. So, if anybody has the opportunity to do it and you'd like to use it as a research tool, fine. That's why we do it. So, with that, I want to thank everybody again, and we'll close this hearing.
Senator, how might we submit that language or those words so that
just
you might
send it
look
to
it
my
over?
office or send it, and I'll make sure that the other members of the committee get a copy of it.
We'll try to provide that promptly.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Thank you.